Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today we are going to discuss the concept of Prama in Nyaya and Vedanta in the paper Epistemology 1, and this module is written by Shakuntala Bora of Gauhati University. I am Raghuram Raju from University of Hyderabad. One way to begin discussing this module is to draw the distinction between metaphysics and epistemology. Metaphysics largely deals with what is and what is not. It deals with what is the ultimate reality, what is the core of existence, is there a something that is behind existence, such as non-being. How did this being come? Did it come from non-being? Those kinds of fundamental ontological questions. Epistemology is about knowing the world. What are the ways of knowing the world? So that is the difference between metaphysics and epistemology. Now, in Sanskrit, jnana, knowledge, stands for all knowledge, both true and false. To know that this is not the case is also a knowledge. So that is the purview or extent of the word jnana in Sanskrit. But the valid knowledge, the true knowledge, is represented by the term Prama. Prama is valid knowledge. And different schools of Indian philosophy accept different Pramas. For instance, you have Charvakas who accept only perception, though there is an argument which we will discuss in the other lessons in this course. There are mitigated Charvakas who also accept some forms of inference. But largely in the literature, it is held that Charvakas accept perception. Buddhism and Vaisheshikas accept not only perception but also inference, anumana. Pratyaksha, that's perception, and inference, that is anumana. Sankhya philosophy accepts perception, inference, and testimony. Nyaya accepts perception, inference, testimony, and comparison. Prabhakara Mimamsa accepts perception, inference, testimony, comparison, and postulation. Advaita Vedanta and Bhatta Mimamsa accept non-cognition also as a valid form of knowledge. So you have varieties of permutations and combinations that are in front of us across different schools of Indian philosophy. Now let us begin with the view of Prama in Nyaya, which is one of the oldest schools of Indian philosophy, predating even Advaita Vedanta. Now, for Nyaya, to begin with, Nyaya is a very complex system and of realists, and in Nyaya there are various strands, and then it has undergone series of developments within the tradition and also in relation to other schools, particularly Buddhists. So there is a large corpus of literature that surrounds under the umbrella called Nyaya school of philosophy, both internally and also in relation to other schools. So let's take some simple concepts for discussion in this short time. The knowledge for Nyaya is cognition of an object. So when I have knowledge, I have cognition of an object. I come in contact with the object. Nyaya interestingly accepts two stages of this contact. The first stage is that I come in contact with the object and say that there is a jar. Now here, cognition is not self-luminous. It is not subject of internal perception. And there is no precise cognition that one is perceiving. It is just that I know generally that there is a chair or there is a jar. There is, for Nyaya, second stage, so to say. And in the second stage, I come and say, I know it is a jar. Now please remember now, this is different from the earlier statement, this is a jar. The second statement has something addition to the first statement, namely, I know. That I know is very, very important for Nyaya, because it is in this stage too, one becomes aware that one is perceiving. This is what is called as anuvyavasaya. That is, I know that it is a jar. In the sense that there is more direct contact with the object. So there is a more negotiated involvement between the subject, the cognizer, and the object that is cognized. So Nyayikas make a distinction between two kinds of knowledge. One is memory or representational knowledge. This is called as Smriti. Smriti is a knowledge born out of mental impressions. It is from the past knowledge. It is a mental impression of the object that I knew earlier. I've seen a chair earlier and now I have a memory of that chair and I represent that chair in its absence. This is what is called as one form of knowledge, which is Smriti. The second one, which is important for Nyaya, is knowledge through apprehension and presentational knowledge. This is what they call as anubhava. This is not Smriti. All that which is not Smriti comes largely under anubhava. The second one is the important aspect of knowledge for Nyayikas. Anubhava is further classified as valid apprehension, which is called yatharthanubhava. That is, object is known as possessing attributes which it really possesses. That there is a jar and the jar is a silver jar. And if the jar possesses silver, then it is called as yatharthanubhava. So there is an object that possesses that particular, that is claimed to possess that particular attribute and it possesses. That is called yatharthanubhava. There is also another form which is erroneous or invalid apprehension. And that is the opposite of yatharthanubhava, avyatharthanubhava. Here, objects looks like possessing silver, but it does not. That is the other form of knowledge that they talk about. Apprehension or yatharthanubhava is not apprehending a universal. So, I mean, like in the idealists like Plato and others, where you talk about jar and there is a jarness. And jarness is the essence or universal into which one particular jar participates. Nyayikas don't accept that. For them, jar is important. You are apprehending jarness only in relation to the jar. So there is no jarness which is independent of the particular jar. So because Nyayikas accept direct contact with the object. Not that object participates in a universal and then you have an access to that universal. No. There is a possibility where the individuals come in direct contact with the object. So knowledge for Nyayikas consist in knowing objects having certain attributes. I mentioned about the silverness of silver in the case of jaw. If objects hold these attributes, then it is true. If it does not, then it is false. So, for Nyayikas, there is nothing like error, Prama from being recognized as a kind of valid knowledge. Valid knowledge means it's true knowledge. That's it. So, Prama is apprehension or presentational anubhava and not representational. They don't accept the representational theory of knowledge. That is, that there is an object and I represent that object. No. It is this that makes them not to accept memory as a valid form of knowledge. Because memory, though faithfully represents an object or an event, it is, however, not a Prama because it arises from mental impressions and not due to objects presented. That I have a memory of an object, but I don't have an object in front of me. Okay, so that is the reason why they don't accept memory as a valid source of knowledge. So valid knowledge is presented and not represented. That's one of the major differences Nyaya has with other schools, and this gives us a lot of scope to go into further details about how they maintain this critique of non-representational form of knowledge, which becomes very prominent subsequent to Descartes, and it completely swept, pervaded in modern philosophy till it was started. It was started contested by continental philosophers and things like that. That's an important area to probe and do more research. Let's not get into it at this point. So valid knowledge for Nyayikas involves three elements. One is there is a subject called Pramartha, there is an object of knowledge called Prameya, and three, means and instruments of knowledge called Pramana. So I know requires that there is a subject which is the substantial ground for all cognition, and the subject is not just cognizing passively. It has its likes and dislikes. It is not just the one which cognizes and has likes and dislikes. It is an intelligent being. It is an embodiment of activity and intelligence. Second is that knowledge implies knowledge of something. You can't just have knowledge just like that. Knowledge is always knowledge of something. That something can be that which exists or which doesn't exist. In fact, the non-existence, the absence or abhava plays a very important role in Nyaya's epistemology. And there's a different subject altogether. It is not, I will not venture to take that issue today. Non-existence, however, is dependent on the existence. For instance, I can perceive, I can have a knowledge of the absence of the jar on the table by perceiving the table. So if you look at it, I'm saying that there is a jar on the table. Now, there is no jar. I can say that I don't see a jar on the table. But what is important is there is something that I see which is table. So I can't cognize the non-jar independent of some object being there. That's an important thing about Nyaya. Whether existence or non-existence, there has to be an object if knowledge has to take place. Some object has to be there. Even for an absence is finally dependent on some presence. You can't have knowledge about absence in a vacuum, so to say. So lastly, the cognizer cognizes the objects by some means or instruments. These means are further divided into special and or uncommon, and those that are common. Common causes are that which causes every effect. For instance, there are invariants such as space, time, and destiny. They are therefore in all the cases. So there is nothing special about them. There is nothing specific about them. They are all common. This is what is called as common causes. Uncommon causes or special. Praman is a special cause. It is with the help of pramana that the subject arrives at the valid knowledge. In fact, for them, pramana is the last link to lead to valid knowledge. That's the important thing of the Nyaya's notion of pramana. Now, from what we have discussed so far, that Nyaya has a very clear classification of different protocols of knowledge making, different procedures of arriving at the horizons of knowledge, at arriving at the nature of knowledge. Having looked at the Nyaya's views on Pramana, let us now look at Vedanta view of Prama. Vedantins accept 6 different sources of knowledge. They are perception, pratyaksha, inference, anumana, comparison, upamana, testimony, shabda, postulation, arthapatti, and non-cognition, anupalabdhi. Corresponding to the sources of knowledge, there are thus 6 different kinds of valid knowledge for Vedanta. There are 2 approaches regarding Prama in Vedanta. One is novelty. The other one is uncontradictoriness, abhaditattva. That means, according to them, according to one version, that knowledge should be novel and it should be uncontradictory. Both are important. The other one is knowledge is only truth and uncontradictory. And for them, false knowledge is no knowledge at all. Unlike Nyaya, for Vedanta, knowledge does not require any further condition to make it true. Knowledge is what it is, independent of its consequences, independent of its justification. So they don't accept the position that knowledge has to be validated through correspondence, knowledge has to be validated to coherence, knowledge has to be validated to pragmatism. All these proofs they don't accept at all, because they find that sometimes a false knowledge can lead to a good result. So they say that the consequences or the other kind of justification are extraneous to the acceptance of something as knowledge. Knowledge is true, independent of justification. That's one of the important aspect, or also almost a unique aspect of Vedanta. So now, let us look at this position about, is novelty an important condition for knowledge? Does knowledge add something new to us? For Vedantins, knowledge has to be new. If I say that I know something, that means I know something that I did not know earlier. Otherwise, how do I know that that I know something? Okay, so knowledge has to have novelty. So now the question that arises at this juncture is, how about continuous cognition of the same object? Do I call that a knowledge? I continue to observe the same object. Am I adding something new? In a matter of saying, I am not. I am looking at this camera continuously. I am giving you the lecture. You are observing the same person who is speaking to you. It is the same person. Are you seeing somebody who is different? Is the person who spoke about Pramana about Nyaya same as the person who is speaking now about Pramana in Advaita? It is same person. But is it monotonous? Is he saying the same thing? Am I saying the same thing again and again? Am I not adding something new, though I am the same person? So the point that Vedanta brings into the discussion is, though in terms of space, in terms of myself, I am the same person who is speaking to you. That is same. So you are not getting any new things from me. But please remember that time is changing. There is a variance in time. In other words, that while there is an invariance in space, in myself speaking to you, there is a variance in the content of what I am speaking. That's the important thing. So in a way, to answer the question, since you are continuously watching this module in video, you are not watching something new in terms of the speaker, but in other way, you are watching something new because I'm talking about various things. I discussed Nyaya earlier, now I'm discussing Vedanta now. So there is a difference there. So in that sense, there is a knowledge which is indeed new. So it is this temporal process, each new moment of cognition adds something new. So Vedanta argues that continual cognition is valid knowledge. So another way of looking at the same problem is that, is there a break in cognition? That when I continue to look at the same object, I am not adding anything new. In other words, there is no break in my cognition. If there is no break in my cognition, then the problem that creeps into the discussion is, why not consider memory too as a mode of pramana? Because there is a continuity between what I saw yesterday and what I am memorizing now. The object is not there in front of me. What I am memorizing is the same object that I had seen yesterday. So there is a continuity, though not as physically continuous as in the case of this lecture. So there is something that I am recalling, and to that extent, memory also can become a valid source of knowledge. Then memory, insofar as it is dependent on past experience, according to them, cannot be considered as separate source of experience, but as falling back on the previous experience. They will not accept this, because what is happening in this sense is not that you are perceiving, that you perceived an object yesterday. Okay, that is a source of knowledge for you. But if you recall, what memory is doing is that it is not doing anything new. It is just recalling what was there earlier. So, however, if novelty is the condition for valid knowledge, then memory does not fulfill this condition, so they don't accept it. So, but generally in the literature, Vedantins are non-committal about the debate whether novelty is an essential character qualification for validity. So let us look at, for instance, the important aspect of this is to also compare it with the empiricists like Locke, Hume, and Berkeley, who make claim that there is an experience and you have ideas, and ideas are with mind, and mind, there are simple ideas and there are complex ideas. Simple ideas have a correspondence between the perception and the idea, whereas complex ideas are the products of memory and imagination, and they can be more or less. So it is in this context one can look at the valid sources of knowledge, pramana, both in these two important and dominant schools of Indian philosophy, namely Nyaya and Vedanta. In summary, what is important to notice here is the intricate details, the close distinctions, the minute stages that they seem to have attended to in building up a case for their standpoint about pramana. The scaffoldings that they have worked out are to be looked more carefully than we have been, and this will give us a better understanding of various schools of Indian philosophy, and also will bring life to this, these schools, and also make them, throw a better light on the discussions of Western philosophy. It is in this sense, in fact, that these discussions can enrich our understanding of various debates in Indian philosophy and Western philosophy. Thank you.